recording starting now. A couple of things. I'm going to mute everyone is simply because of the fact that it will allow me to go ahead and just kind of go through this. If you have any questions as we go through, though, do not hesitate to unmute yourself and just let me know. Now, I'm also going to keep chat up kind of in the corner. I'm assuming that everybody can see the screen okay?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Like you actually see the protocol on the screen right now? That's a good thing. That's what I'm hoping. Okay. This hopefully should not take long. I went through and I highlighted some things. And really the purpose is just to make sure that there's no intent to try and tell anyone how to be an EMS provider. That's not what this is. The idea is to give you an overview of some of the idiosyncrasies with the BLS protocol that apply to all providers in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and also to give you some of those little idiosyncrasies and specific bits of information about Mercer County and about the Shenango Valley in particular, just to help eliminate some of those questions that may come up. For those of you that have absolutely no idea who I am, I'm one of the founders of Elite. My name is Glenn Miller. I've been a paramedic for somewhere in the ballpark of about 30 years now. I used to manage McGonagall's. After that, I was the EMS coordinator at Sharon Regional for a little over a decade, and then took a couple years outside of EMS as my primary, and then decided to actually start Elite. So I've been with Elite since 3 months before it opened. Going back to, I don't know, it's been about 10 and a half, almost 11 years at this point. I'm an EMS instructor in both Pennsylvania and in Ohio. I am a paramedic in both PA and Ohio. I have worked in every area that most of you have worked, except for those of you that have worked in the Mansfield area. But I've done, Trumbull County, Mahoning County in Ohio, Mercer County, Lawrence County in Pennsylvania. So I really I know not only the protocol, but I know how it fits into how things work in the Shenango Valley area and in Mercer County. So that's really the whole purpose of this, is just to kind of go through and say, okay, here's what we're looking at. Relatively easy. If I can get it to work, there you go. Document to read. When you first open it up and take a look at it, for those of you that may not have done that before, the first couple pages are obviously throwaways, and then you're going to see a table of contents. Now, the things that are highlighted in yellow on the document that you will pull off the internet or that will be emailed to you are things that have changed since the previous version of the protocol. So it's usually updated every 2 to 3 years. The last update was September of 2019, unless they snuck one in on me. Since then, I don't believe that they have, because
they actually have one online on the PA website for 2020 involving COVID updates.
Okay. And we're not going to go over the COVID updates. You guys are pretty familiar with those as it is. We're going to stick with this one for now. It's going to give you, it at least gives me the ability to go through the key things. And I'm here to tell you the changes were not that significant. And nobody is assuming that you guys can't read a protocol and understand it. I just want to make sure that some of the things that are commonly missed by people coming into Pennsylvania to work aren't missed by you guys, because obviously Elite is kind of under the microscope right now. Okay. So the things that are highlighted were changed from the previous year, but I've added highlights as well. I added highlights in the middle, like around this 227, 228, 250, just to point out the fact that there are some optional protocols here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. For those of you that are not muted, I am going to mute you just so I can not have background noise. If you need to talk, unmute yourself and just speak up and say, hey, I need to ask a question. I'm happy to answer. Okay. So there are some optional protocols. I'll talk about those when we get to them, and some of the other optional skills for EMTs, because Rachel in particular, there's some things that we may have to do in order to permit people to perform these functions. I don't know if that's been handled with the medical director for the new folks or not. And we have some interesting challenges to work through on some of that, because they require you to take classes that aren't accessible for those that are outside of PA certification yet. So we'll try.
I am in the middle of working through that, so we'll chat.
Yeah, we'll just have to, I'll try and help as much as I can with that. Some of it I think is just going to have to wait until we get reciprocity done. So anyway, That's the basic core background. Table of contents is 2 pages. I don't need to tell you about scene safety or infection control. Those are common EMS functions. They're not big and difficult and challenging. The refusal process in Pennsylvania is very different than it is in the state of Ohio, at least considering all the places I've worked in the state of Ohio. Not only do we have to document in our normal EMS charts or whatever electronic documentation system or electronic PCR function that you're using, but we also have to complete an actual EMS patient refusal checklist. That checklist has to be part of the actual patient chart. So in the billing process, they'll go ahead and scan that in, or you guys will scan it in and attach it into your chart, and it becomes part of the permanent record. A copy is left with the patient as well. This is driven by protocol. It's not a throwaway piece of paper that people just get told that they have to do. It's not a company policy. It is part of the state rules and regs that form actually has to be completed. Yes, there are some challenges with refusals. And Pennsylvania has tried to look at this BLS protocol and tried to address all of the things that might happen that maybe some protocols leave in a gray area. They're not necessarily 100% effective in doing that, but they've at least tried to do that. So I know that in your clipboards or in your units, you should have the actual EMS patient refusal checklist. That's a required document. The original should be kept by the service. The copy should be given to the patient. We want their original signature on the document that we actually keep on file at the station, or at least that we eventually scan. We don't want to have to scan a kind of a horrible copy of it. It is important that you fill it out word for word. Our document that we use at Elite actually matches letter for letter the document that is put out in the state BLS protocol. If you have any questions about this, feel free to contact command. And the document is actually going to tell you when you should be contacting medical command. It is acceptable per the protocol if you have a minor or someone under the age of 18 who is not who's not a parent themselves, or whatever the case may be. And there's a big explanation in this protocol about what qualifies as a minor and what doesn't qualify as a minor. If you do have a minor in the state of Pennsylvania, it is acceptable to take verbal consent from their parent by telephone. It is preferred, however, as you see highlighted on this page, that you have a witness for that. And obviously it has to be documented very well. Our preference is also that you have the medical command physician speak directly with that parent if possible. That's very difficult to do sometimes unless you're really good at doing 3-way phone calls or something to that effect. This is what the form looks like. And as you go through the form, any place where you mark in a gray area, so are they under the age of 18? Yeah, they're less than 18, or they're not oriented to something, or it was one of these situations. If it's gray, that means you have to contact the command physician in order to accept that refusal. Now, the command physician can only give you a couple of options related to that refusal, and I'm going to bounce back a little bit. They can only tell you, they can only ask to speak with the patient, which is a great thing to do, or they can tell you to contact either mental health or the law enforcement agency. I'm assuming that most of you guys that are from the state of Ohio are familiar with the concept of pink slipping a patient or putting them under law enforcement protective custody so we can transport them against their will. I know we used to do that a lot in Mahoning County and in Trumbull County when we had a need to do that, and a patient was uncooperative, or they were a potential suicide, or they were under the influence or something to that effect. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you do not have that option. The law enforcement agencies cannot force the patient to get transported to the hospital. This contact with the medical command physician with a patient that does not want to go to the hospital is kind of a formality where you say, well, doc, I just wanted to tell you that I have this patient and the regs say that I have to contact you, and it's in the gray area on my form. Do you want to talk to the patient? Do you want to, I'll call law enforcement, I'll call mental health. I'll get everybody I need to get involved, but you still can't take them against their will. Does anybody have any questions about that? Because I know that that's caused some issues with incoming folks in the past.
No, I think that's actually an excellent thing. That's way easier than Ohio.
Yeah, it's, actually, I used to think it was much easier in Ohio to just say, hey, look, we'll just tell the cops to put you under protective custody and we'll take you to the hospital. We can't do that in PA. So sometimes it's a challenge. The law enforcement agencies will be very good about playing that card, even though they can't actually do it, and saying that you're either going to go with them or go with us. And maybe they're not lying, because they will take them and make their lives difficult and put them in lockup for a little bit, but they can't force them to go to the hospital. So anyway, thought that was
Real
important
quick,
to bring up.
so if somebody is mentally competent, like they're alert and oriented, but they're not mentally competent at that point, like because of suicidal ideation or things like that, like that's what the call came in as, filling out this form.
If they know who they are, where they are, what day or time it is, and understand the events. So they're mentally competent and they are refusing. And they're going, yeah,
Right.
I tried to kill myself. And yeah, I'm going to try and kill myself when you leave. They're a suicide attempt. We have to call medical
Right.
command, but we still
Okay.
cannot take them against their will.
Okay. But
You
we
can
can get
call
police
mental health.
involved or mental health.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can call the county. County will call the mental health delegate. The mental health delegate will come to the scene or advise you to transport against their will through law enforcement. Law enforcement will work with mental health. They do it all the time. And they can decide, mental health can decide that they're going to 302 the patient. 302 actually stands for the Pennsylvania code that allows physicians to do involuntary commit on patients in PA. So they'll 302 them. And at that point, we may be directed to take them against their will by law enforcement or mental health or both. But that's a pretty rare situation. Now, we get a lot of calls from mental health to come pick up patients that are 302s, and then they just say, we'll just meet you at the hospital. And in those cases, we may have to restrain and transport. That's the secondary twist to this. Those folks aren't allowed to refuse, so this protocol doesn't apply. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. I just wanted clarification on that.
Okay.
As to like with things that happen like that.
Yeah. When in doubt, call medical command. And if you know the patient needs to go and they still refuse to, ask law enforcement or call county and ask them to call mental health, because those are your only two options. That's it. All right.
Thank you.
Non-transport or cancellation. We typically have you guys do, I'm not quite sure if they still have you doing trip sheets on these, just to verify who canceled you and why, but this protocol indicates to you that yes, it is okay for a fire department to cancel you. And yes, it is okay for the police department to cancel you. And yes, it is okay for the dispatch center to call and cancel you while en route, because additional information has been received. It also spells out very specifically, and this is important for those situations when you have a non-ALS, non-paramedic crew as your primary crew, or on any initial response, that once that patient care falls under an ALS provider, this protocol actually prevents them from releasing that patient back to a BLS service. Now, that doesn't mean that if a paramedic and an EMT show up on the same scene, that the paramedic does an assessment that the EMT can't do care and transport the patient. That falls under a different protocol in the ALS protocol. So be sure you understand the difference. This has to do with a release of care from one service to another service, from a higher level provider to a lower level provider. And it kind of sets out the rules there related to that. Can always be done with a medical command interaction, or if there's multiple patients, just be careful that you're documenting appropriately. So this one in particular says the initial practitioner must transfer care to an individual with equivalent or higher level of training, such as ALS to ALS or ground to air medical crew, those kind of things. So like I said, there's another protocol that deals with if we have ALS and BLS providers on the same crew that falls in a different set of protocols. Okay. In order to operate, once you guys get your Pennsylvania certifications, for those that are not PA certified, in order to operate an emergency vehicle, you're also going to have to get the EMS VO certification. It's a very simple paperwork shuffle that goes, just make sure you're applying for it when you apply for reciprocity. EMS VO stands for EMS vehicle operator. In order to drive an ambulance, you actually have to be an EMS vehicle operator. Other than that, this just kind of details when you should and shouldn't be going lights and sirens. In reality, we have always allowed that to be driven by the county protocol related to Bravos, Charlies, Deltas, et cetera. If anybody ever has any questions about that, just let me know. But those folks that are left from before know the answers to those questions in most cases. You are absolutely prohibited from using warning lights and sirens when ALS care is not indicated. So that doesn't mean that if you're an EMT crew, you can't transport the patient with lights and sirens. But if there's a paramedic there and they're the ones driving and the EMTs in the back, they sure better not be transporting lights and sirens. We don't transport a whole lot of patients' lights and sirens in EMS anymore, so this should not be a surprise to anyone, okay? This protocol also spells out very clearly, and I like this part right here, that all patients on the stretcher have to be restrained following the manufacturer's recommendation for straps. Therefore, it is a protocol violation if you do not use shoulder straps on your patients 100% of the time. It has been unacceptable at Elite EMS for the last decade to not use shoulder straps. I'm not saying that you're not using them. I'm just telling you that you are supposed to be using them per protocol. If you get in a motor vehicle accident and that patient gets injured and they were not wearing shoulder straps, I guarantee you they're going to come after you in court for it. So just do yourself a favor and get used to wearing them, unless there's a specific reason not to have them on because of something like a shoulder injury or a cardiac arrest patient or something like that. All right. Okay, safe transportation of children is obviously an issue. This was an updated protocol in 2019, which is why it's all highlighted. We have equipment in the vehicles. We have like the PD mates that are able to take patients up to 100 pounds or safely transport kids up to 100 pounds. That was a recent change in protocol back in 2019, where we had to actually replace all of our PD mates because they used to only have to go to 80 pounds. And then the national guidelines changed to 100 pounds and Pennsylvania adopted them. Make sure you know how to use them, watch videos on them, practice on them, whatever the case may be. Make sure that you're using them and safely transporting kids with the appropriate equipment as per the federal and state guidelines, please. Rehab at a fire scene, there's a protocol for it. Read through it. That way you'll know what to do. Big deal. Patient destination, usually again driven by the hospital capabilities or the patient choice. You can make an exception for patient choice. And yes, you can take a patient in Pennsylvania to a non-STEMI capable hospital with a patient that's having an actual ST elevation MI, if they are appropriately informed and they still absolutely refuse. This will happen sometimes where we'll have a patient that has a potential or is confirmed as having a heart attack or something to that effect, or sometimes with stroke patients. And Sharon Regional Medical Center is both our chest pain center and our stroke center as per the state certification. So if you go to the state guideline, go to the state website and they're listed in the protocol and look up for Mercer County what our chest pain centers and our stroke centers are, it's only going to have Sharon Regional there. They may flatly refuse to go to Sharon Regional and say, I go to UPMC. I want to go to UPMC Shenango and Farrell. You can advise them, well, they're not a chest pain center, and that's important. And make sure that you're documenting, you're explaining that to them, because you have to document that exception because the protocol says you should be taking them to the appropriate center. There are some weather condition exceptions out there. We'll talk a little bit about, and here's actually the guidelines for STEMI and for stroke. The website is actually listed right here for the stroke centers. And I know that the cardiac centers or STEMI centers are listed on the state website as well, the state EMS website. I can find that if anybody ever needs it. The nearest and only trauma center to us is St. Elizabeth's over in Youngstown. If we ever were to use Stat Medevac or another helicopter service, that's where they would transport the patient. But I'll talk about that when we get to that protocol. It's unlikely you're going to do that a whole lot in the Shenango Valley because St. E's is so close to us. Okay. All right. Trauma patient destination criteria. Again, any category 1 or category 2 traumas are typically going to go directly to St. Elizabeth's. If it's a level 1, we're obviously going to take them to a level 1 center. And the guideline related to air medical versus ground is specifically, it states that if the helicopter can get to you, package the patient, take off, and get to the hospital quicker than you could just get them to the hospital, then you can go ahead and call the air medical. But that 45-minute guideline that you'll see right here, so otherwise transport can occur within 45 minutes. You're going to see 45 minutes recurring throughout this protocol. Transport by ground to closest trauma center, level 1, 2, or 3, if within 45 minutes. Requires immediate transport to a trauma center if within 45 minutes. We can always get to St. E's from Mercer County in less than 45 minutes, unless you are way up in Greenville or way out in South Palmatooni Township or something to that effect. So make sure you know the area, because most of those patients are going to go directly by ground, and we won't be calling helicopters on them. This is where it's actually in writing. To transport them by ground, if drive time is less than 45 minutes, consider air transport if there's a specific reason for it, or they're entrapped or something to that effect. That's typically the only time we would be calling for air medical in the Shenango Valley area. And again, it tells you to take into account not just the transit time, but the prep time, the loading time, et cetera, and the amount of time it takes for the helicopter to actually get there. Remember, when you get ETAs on helicopters from our county, they're going to give you whatever that helicopter service gives them. So if you're told that you have a 15-minute ETA from one of the helicopters, that's for them to get in the area, and then they have to take about 3 or 4 minutes to make sure the landing zone is clear and land. And then they have to wind down, and then they have to offload, and then they have to assess the patient. Then they have to package the patient, and then they have to reload them. And so it's taking them easily on scene 45 minutes, when in reality, we can typically be at St. E's in about 20, which is why we're not typically using air medical. This again, same thing. It says you can use air medical in Pennsylvania for non-trauma if you had a need to do that. But the reality of it is we have multiple open heart programs and chest pain and stroke centers within less than 45 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes of drive time. And therefore, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do that. So we just don't. Okay. This again just tells you where those trauma patients are going to end up going. St. E's is really the only option coming out of the Shenango Valley area. So make sure you know the way to get there relatively easily, or pre-program it in the GPSs if you need to do that. There is a protocol on how to be safe around the air ambulance. One on initial patient contact, but this is standard, BLS approach to a patient. There's no reason for me to go over it. There is a reason that there are things in here related to, there's actually a whole protocol that you'll find in the BLS protocols related to assisting ventilations with a bag valve mask and how you go about doing that. And the reason is that there was a lawsuit many years ago where there was an EMT that was ventilating an endotracheal tube on a cardiac arrest. The patient had a bad outcome. The family sued, and they won the case because of the fact that the state protocol and the scope of practice did not permit EMTs to use bag valve mask devices to ventilate through an endotracheal tube, only through a mask. So that was an important enough case that the protocol was written to try and anticipate all of those types of situations. So you'll see a ventilation protocol related to endotracheal tubes here in a little bit. Some of this information that's highlighted that was updated in this protocol is because of that case that occurred several years ago. Abuse and neglect, child and elder, is mandatory reporting in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The protocol actually tells you exactly what phone number to call, exactly what form to complete, exactly who to talk to, etc. Now, the common practice has been for years that if you talk to the nurse and the physician and they state that they are going to report it, that we just follow up with them and make sure that they actually reported it. I personally have typically gone on electronically to the compass.state.pa.us site that you see listed right here in this box where my arrow is, and actually made a secondary report myself just to ensure that was done, because we are required by law to report. So why wouldn't we? I'd rather there be multiple reports than a single report if we actually felt that there was a possibility of some kind of abuse or neglect of a child or an elder. There's an expectation of reporting for elder abuse as well. There is no website for that, but there is a 1-800 number that you can call for the state. Human trafficking, same thing. It just tells you like who to contact, how to go about doing it. Suspicious activity, law enforcement goes here. There's a national human trafficking resource center. I just forgot to highlight that one. So here, I'll highlight it now. There you go. All right, indications for ALS use. These are spelled out in the protocols. This is a general set of recommendations. This is why we have made the decision that automatically on every Charlie, Delta, and Echo response that comes from the county, ALS will be simultaneously dispatched from another service if we don't have ALS actually responding on our vehicles. I got to tell you, it's just simply to protect the company and to protect the individuals. It has to be done every single time. Ventilation via endotracheal tube or alternative rescue airway. This is the protocol I was talking about. It actually spells out the fact that EMTs are allowed to ventilate an endotracheal tube or a king airway or whatever the case may be, simply because of the fact that that had to be put into the scope of practice because of the lawsuit that I had mentioned previously. All right, carbon monoxide or coax. And you can tell that I'm kind of skipping protocols. You guys should know how to use pulse oximetry. I don't need to tell you anything about that. We do have an optional protocol to use carbon monoxide co-oximetry. We do not have co-oximeters at this time. If you ever get them, make sure that you're following these guidelines and actually notifying the agency medical director, getting the proper education completed, etc. Prior to COVID, what we did is we did an annual update with Sharon Regional where the medical director would come in and we would do like a 4 or 5 hour practical skills and didactic educational session where we would go over all of these BLS things that are kind of special optional functions, and then make sure that all the crews, regardless of level of certification, knew how to do them. And then we'd go over some ALS skills as well for the medics and for the advanced EMTs. That kind of got put on hold because of COVID. I think that will be picking back up next year, hopefully, once everything kind of dies down. Glucose measurement. You are not permitted in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as an EMT to use a glucometer unless you have gotten specific training and it has been approved by the ALS medical director or the EMS agency's medical director, etc. Now, in the past, we required all EMTs to go do this training online. This is what Rachel and I were talking about earlier. The online course is only available to people with PA EMT certifications. So I honestly don't believe that a basic would be permitted to utilize a glucometer based upon this protocol at this time until they are a Pennsylvania EMT. However, we may have to actually get some clarification from MCO West on this. Rachel, if you're listening, which I know you are, simply because of the fact that the guidelines that allow us to use Ohio folks to function, allow them to function within their scope of practice. as long as it's within the PA scope of practice. So
Right. And I've already put it together in an email to Bill from MCO West because I did notice that. So I'm in the process of pursuing an answer for that.
yeah, and it won't just be glucose. Just kind of keep track of a list of all the things we have to ask about, because it's not just glucometers. There's all sorts of stuff.
You got it.
Protocol. All right. 12 lead electrocardiography. Yes, there is a place in the protocol, in the BLS protocol, that allows an EMT to assist with obtaining a 12 lead. And even in some cases, there are some BLS services that are not paramedic services that actually carry 12 leads and can use them just for simple transmission. This is a little bit weird. It had to be done for some of the more rural areas. There's a lot of training with this one we have not pursued in the past, because the reality of it is we always have a paramedic close, that's close by enough in order to actually get a 12 lead for patients that we think need them. There is a protocol that allows EMTs to assist with putting electrodes on the chest. It does state that the ALS provider is the one that is responsible for verifying that they're placed correctly and all of the interpretation. You are, as a BLS provider, are not permitted to use AED electrodes or anything to ECG monitor. This is very important. BLS providers are not permitted to apply anything for the purpose of ECG monitoring, again, unless in the direct presence of an ALS practitioner who's functioning there on the scene. That applies to interfacilities as well. EMTs and intermediates are not permitted to cardiac monitor because of the fact that they're able to transmit. It has to be a paramedic with that patient. That's the way it's written in the scope of practice. But this takes away the liability for having an EMT actually place leads on a patient. That's all it's really designed for. It even says that you're allowed to help with connection of a 12 lead as long as the paramedic verifies proper placement and is responsible for it. So we have 12 leads done by EMTs all the time where they're putting the electrodes on and then the paramedic is actually running the 12 lead and reading it. Okay. Spinal care, no reason to go over. We don't board a whole lot of patients. So if you're used to using a backboard, read this one very closely. Okay. That's all I can tell you. Protocol 261 is pretty important for spinal care. DOA, this again is relatively simple. I'm pretty sure, Rachel, do you guys have the county coroner's death reports, the multi-part forms on the truck?
Yeah. Yeah, we do. And there was a change when I went to the Mercer County meeting. They even have like an email address they want you to send death reports to now. So we've been updated on all that.
Okay, so you got that email address too?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, good. We handle DOAs very differently than most areas that I have ever worked before in Mercer County. I live out near Philadelphia. I had moved out here about 1.5 or 2 years ago due to some family needs. Otherwise, I'd still be at Elite on a full-time basis if it wasn't for that and some other medical issues that prevented me from being on the truck full-time. The way that we handle them in Mercer County is like nothing I've ever seen because the coroner's office doesn't typically do any kind of transports, and DOAs may tie you up for an extended period of time. Make sure you know the phone number to call. Make sure you fill out the form. The reality of it is due to some previous business arrangements, the coroner's office, the off hours and emergency number that EMS calls is still McGonigal Ambulance Services primary phone number. To my knowledge, that has not changed yet, although we anticipate that it will for the business dealings day to day, not for reporting actual DOAs. There is another phone number, and there's actually a full-time staff member that works for the coroner's office now that used to be a dispatcher and an EMT that actually used to work for me at one point. So just make sure you know what the process is. We typically go to the scene, call the coroner. If we start resuscitation and terminate, we go through medical command and then call the coroner if we need to. And I believe that the coroner's office, once notified on all out of hospital deaths because of COVID, That will change eventually to where if it's an obvious reason and it was a non-COVID related thing and it was just an elderly person with cancer or something, that we can just go ahead and call the family doctor and then call the funeral home. That's what we used to do. I don't think that's going on anymore. So just stay in tune with this and talk to some of the folks that have been there for a longer period of time to really understand the details of how we handle DOAs before you get one and don't know what to do. Pre-hospital do not resuscitate orders. Pennsylvania has a kind of an odd law. It's different than the Ohio pre-hospital, comfort care rules that are out in Ohio. In Pennsylvania, there is a single acceptable version called the out of hospital do not resuscitate order that most people never get filled out. It is still common for people to hand you advanced directives, living wills, what they call a POLST form, which is a physician order for life-sustaining treatment, or some kind of other DNR forms. We are not permitted to accept them as EMS providers in the state of Pennsylvania unless it is the specific Pennsylvania out of hospital do not resuscitate order. Now, you can also have this in a necklace. You can have this in a wristband. Out of hospital DNR. I'm going to try and pull up some pictures of it and drag it onto the screen. Oh, there it is. All right. So this is what the do not resuscitate order itself looks like. And you'll see at the top, it says Pennsylvania Department of Health, out of hospital do not resuscitate order. I just did a Google search for this. It does not go into effect as per the protocol until such time as the patient is actually in cardiac or respiratory distress. So if they say they have a living will and they don't want a tube, you have to start to resuscitate and contact medical command. And that's what this will say. This is an important sentence right here. Now, out of hospital DNR order, bracelet or necklace is of no consequence unless the patient is in cardiac or respiratory arrest. If vital signs are present, the EMS practitioner shall provide medical interventions necessary and shall alleviate pain, blah, blah, unless otherwise directed by the patient or a medical command physician. So the patient can still refuse because they have the right of refusal, but the family cannot. It's either the patient or a medical command physician unless there is a written, appropriate Pennsylvania out of hospital DNR order, the original order, not a copy of it, or a bracelet or a necklace. You got to be careful with this one. And I got to tell you, I think in a decade at Elite Plus, I maybe saw actual PA DNR orders for out of hospital maybe twice. Everybody gives us a living will or everybody gives us a hospital DNR, and we have to call a medical command physician every single time. It is a pain in the butt. I shouldn't have to tell you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just a question. Is it the pink one? Because I've seen them at another service I worked at because I'm a PA EMT.
They were pink for a while. So those ones should still be valid. You can get pictures of the wristbands and what their orders actually look like online as well. But just make sure it says Pennsylvania, like out of hospital, do not resuscitate order. All right. General cardiac arrest. This, some of the things in here vary from American Heart Association and American Red Cross guidelines. So maybe this has been updated, but one ventilation for every 10 compressions is not what's being taught now. It's not what the science upholds. So double check the protocol, and I'll tell you where to go to check that as well. We'll even pull up the 2021. Same thing here, pediatric cardiac arrest. I don't have to tell you guys how to do EMS stuff, hopefully. Allergic reaction. So here's the second thing to put on the list to ask about, Rachel. Epi auto injectors, we actually have them for EMTs and for intermediates. We don't carry them on the truck as a standard. All these are owned by Sharon Regional. Because they're so expensive, they only gave us 1 or 2 sets of them for the trucks, and then they were locked up in a separate cabinet. So if you're not sure where those are, we need to find them. But that also needs to go on the list of, are we allowed to administer them in an allergic reaction, anaphylaxis, or do we have to wait until people go through the specific PA training and get their PA certifications? Because that's one of those optional things as well.
It's on the list, and those are locked up in the drug closet for anybody who doesn't know.
Yeah, we only ever used to pull them out if we were like sending a BLS truck to cover a football game or something like that. Otherwise, we never had BLS trucks unless they were on specific interfacility transports. So, all right. The same thing with respiratory distress, CPAP. CPAP is one of those optional things. Same thing with albuterol or Duoneb solutions and nebulizer devices. Those are permitted in certain circumstances as well. So same sets of rules, same educational requirements, same thing with the agency medical director having to approve it. But we're pretty liberal related to what basic EMTs can do, as long as they have the specific training and they've been signed off by the medical director. I just don't know how those play into the non-PA certified folks. So keep an eye out for those. There's even a list of what you're allowed to use, etc. Chest pain, shouldn't have to tell you how to do that. Oh, assisted nitroglycerin is another one that you are permitted to use one time before you call medical command. So make sure if you're an EMT, you're paying close attention to this protocol. It has to be their nitro. It cannot be the nitro off the truck. It has to be actually prescribed to them, or you cannot give it to them. And that's actually spelled out in the protocol as well. We are allowed to carry hemostatic agents for bleeding control. Same thing, they have to be specially trained, oriented, medical director has to approve it, etc., for use at the BLS level. Head injury, impaled object. Most of this stuff is just simple medical protocol with nothing weird associated with it. Altered level of consciousness, diabetic, you'll see in here, the use of the glucometer, that particular protocol is referenced. It's protocol number 228 right down here. So it's still the same idea that you have to have the approval to actually use the glucometer. Oh, and naloxone, I must have skipped over it. Narcan was the other one, is the ability to give nasal Narcan. Is a BLS function that also is in the protocol that you need the special approval for. So that's the other thing that I would add. So there's a lot of stuff between CPAP, Narcan, glucometer, the EpiPens, et cetera, et cetera. There's just a ton of them. All right. So that's about the end. Oh, here's the Narcan stuff. So poisoning, toxic exposure, ingestion under 831. Only an EMR or EMT that has completed the Narcan administration for EMT course on the system may administer naloxone. This tells you how to give it, what you're allowed to carry, how, etc. Obviously, there's an expectation that everybody's permitted to do this. We've run into that already with some of the law enforcement agencies that don't really understand when we shouldn't do it. That's not an uncommon problem. But that has to be on the list as well.
Okay.
You can feel free to contact medical command with any questions at any time. This protocol tells you that you should do that. There's also a protocol on what to do if there's an on-scene physician or RN who tries to take over, which happens on occasion. You have a protocol to tell you how to deal with that. Yes, you can transport service animals, but they have to be true service animals. This protocol addresses it. Don't mess with indwelling catheters. You can at the ALS level, but this protocol basically exists to say that if it's a medical need that they have, that they manage on their own on a daily basis, it's some kind of a vacuum drain, it's a Foley, it's any kind of indwelling tube or device that we don't have to deal with, then we can transport it as long as we don't have to deal with it. Suspected influenza-like
Question.
illness. Yes.
Would that include for BLS transport a chest tube that's been clamped off? In Ohio, we're allowed to transport on a BLS level chest tubes clamped off.
If the patient and his or her family has been taught to use and manage the device by themselves, then yes. If the device does not have any need for EMS providers to interact with it, including, and it's right here under letter C, vacuum drains, nephrostomy tubes, Foley catheters, and other devices that will either be managed by the patient, patient's family, or by medical personnel who will only intermittently monitor the device. If that is capped off, locked off, whatever, technically, yeah, they could. If there's any, my experience has been, we don't transport those patients. We never get requests to transport them. If there's a chest tube in, they're sending a medic the vast majority of times. So I don't think that's ever come up because they just don't do it over here.
Okay, I just wasn't sure because I know in Ohio they allow it.
Technically,
figured I'd ask.
I think it would be allowed. I'm assuming that they do that, Jake, on an interfacility basis.
Yeah.
Like from where to where?
We had a chest tube patient from Greenbrier. He initially was on a gravity drain chest tube, and
Right.
they clamped it off for transport to a CT scan and then returned back to facility.
Yeah, Glenn, that's pretty common.
This protocol would cover that. We just don't ever get those requests. But if you ever got it, this protocol would cover it.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. Thank you. All right. Influenza-like illness basically tells you protect yourself, wear PPE. We're much better at that than we ever have been before. This is where all the COVID stuff fell before COVID was a thing. And then there's some appendices here for things like, heat stress and APGAR, et cetera. The handoff report is called DMIST in PA. Most of you are familiar with that. This is the 30-second report that we're going to give to the hospitals when we actually drop the patient off. For those of you that want a ready reference related to the protocol itself, I would highly recommend, if you haven't done it yet, to download, if I can find it, the UPMC EMS Navigator software. I'm going to throw it up on the screen right now, onto your cell phone or your device. It's available both on Apple and on Google. It's called UPMC EMS Navigator, and it has cute little tabs that you will click on. You can see them right here where it says protocols. You'll click on the tabs and it will actually give you the protocol so you can read through it. It's a great resource as a quick ready reference if you forget anything. It also has some other things built into it, like some drug calculation tools. The protocols are spelled out pretty easily. There's even the ability to transmit 12 leads to facilities and call for aeromedical through it. Absolute must related to the PA protocols, and they update it whenever the PA protocol updates. So I don't know if you guys were aware of that, but it's absolutely a great tool. Now, my goal was to try and get through this in less than an hour. We've only been going for about 48 minutes, so that's a winner as far as I'm concerned. That is the entire BLS protocol. I didn't see a whole lot of reason to waste a whole lot of time going over stuff that didn't need to be gone over. I just kind of wanted to have the chance to go over some of those core differences with you guys. Are there any questions at this point from anybody?
I don't think you have too much. Everybody, just so you know, you were sent the digital link to the EMT protocol for Pennsylvania that you can bookmark on your phone if necessary. Everybody's already been referencing that anyways, but just so that you have it in case you receive a call where you're not exactly sure how you're going to proceed. Other than that, some of these things, in terms of the epi, I do have to talk to Bill about, because we actually hadn't really discussed that. I had just locked it up for the time being. So, but yeah, we're on the glucometer and the naloxone. We're taking care of that. So
Good deal. Yeah, and I should have done it earlier, but I pulled up the 2020 version of the BLS protocol. So they just did a handful of updates with a couple of things. Hopefully they fixed the cardiac arrest stuff to show the right. Let's see, 331. Yeah, the same stuff is highlighted that was highlighted before. Like, they didn't even highlight the changes here, because I don't think they changed. No, all they changed was the fact that they added the COVID stuff in this protocol.
It's a little bit different for the ALS. There's more highlighted in the ALS, but there's really not hardly anything in the BLS.
Yeah, all these changes that they have listed at the front of the 2020 protocol are all changes that occurred in 2019. So I'm not surprised. They were in a hurry and they were really busy when this was going on. So yeah, this was solely for the purpose of updating influenza-like illness protocol to allow additional guidance for COVID. So nothing has changed other than the COVID-oriented stuff since that protocol was published in 2019. So now I know the ALS had some changes, and when we do the ALS one next week, we'll do the advanced and the paramedic. Although they reference back to the BLS protocol a lot, which is why we wanted this available to everyone. We will make sure that we're using the 2020 versions of those protocols. All right, back to anybody have any questions? If not,
I have a comment real quick.
yes, Miss Patty.
Well, with me being in PA already and me not really being on the trucks very much, Rachel has been a little confused. Rachel, can you send me like whatever links that you've been sending the other EMTs, just so I have it? 'Cause like I said, I haven't been on a truck in a couple of years. Just so I keep up in case you do have to put me on a truck one day.
So Patty, I had mentioned before, if you check your text messages right now, I sent you the link to the protocol so that you can look at it.
I didn't get it. That's why. The only thing I got was the thing for the.
I'll try to resend it right now.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And since this is recorded for those that couldn't make it, anything like that, try and hold until afterwards. Are there any questions about the protocol itself, or about functioning in the Mercer County area, or any little idiosyncrasies you guys have run into, or questions about interaction with the fire departments or the law enforcement agencies, or anything like that that I can help with before you guys go?
Can we get I don't know if we have the numbers for the at least I don't, for the coroner's office and stuff. I saw the fax number, but can I get that stuff too?
Yeah, Patty, that's hanging up in dispatch, but I'll go ahead and have them sent over to you too, okay?
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Okay, anything else?
No, Glenn, I think we're good.
I was just about to say, Rachel, do you have anything you want to say to him before I stop recording?
So if you're all in here for the training, I've written your names down, so you have no need to let me know. I'll make sure that you get paid for the hour that you were here. And if anybody thinks of any other questions, or it's something that Glenn needs to answer, let me know, and I'll make sure that, we get that on to him, okay?
Yeah, trust me, Rachel and I talk pretty much every day, so any questions, feel free. All right, recording is stopped.